Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today we're taking another look at Mythical Island, the mini set releasing on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, the 17th, and it's going to be adding in a bunch of new cards. There was some info, I don't know if this is new info or just info I didn't talk about before, but there's some info about the set, including its size and some more of the cards that we're getting in it, though not specific cards, but I'll be talking about the specific impact that it will have on, I guess, like the metagame and what the best decks are and different decks. I did go over these in the more of like first look, and you can see that video. And I will be, of course, talking about this set yet again once the entire set is revealed. We'll see if I talk about the cards, like for example, MUEX. We'll see if I talk about that then in that video, or if I'll just talk about the new ones. But regardless, there's going to be over 80 cards, which is a bunch. This will probably include secret rares. So in terms of actual cards, like unique cards, it's not necessarily 80. We haven't seen any reprints. We've seen I talked about this in the previous video. We see this Pikachu. Well, okay, this isn't like a great. It's not a whole card, but it's part of a card. And this Pikachu, obviously, we have a Pikachu in the game. I believe there's just one. And Tauros has a card. Magmar has a card. Execute has a card. And Vaporeon has a card. And then Mew has a card, but not an EX. Same thing with Aerodactyl. And yeah, so that's pretty interesting to note. Looking at the pack art, we know that there's going to be so for the five confirmed, there are going to be five new EXs. We know Mew EX, we've seen that, and we've seen Aerodactyl EX, and we'll talk about those a little bit. And then you have Celebi EX we're confirmed to get, and Pidgeot EX as well. And yeah, I didn't know about the Celebi EX. Maybe it's somewhere down here. I'm not sure. And then apparently, you can earn some hourglasses by logging in during these different periods, the 3 days that the set drops. So you'll be getting new stuff as well as new challenges, solo battles, which can get you stuff as well. So just keep that in mind. You will be getting extra currency during this time with new set drops, and we'll be seeing that presumably with every new set. However, the cards, I'm not going to talk about some of these because they're not really meaningful at all, but I want to be going through the decks, talking about what they're going to add and what's going to hurt them. We are getting 5 new trainers confirmed, and so, and other Pokemon, we'll see Volcarona, which we saw the Larvesta, like Gyarados, and Gyarados already has a card, and Primeape, which is interesting. Primeape's definitely one to keep. I think it's an interesting evolution line. We'll talk some about fighting, and then Superior as well, which we essentially had confirmed through the Snivy. And presumably we'll have the evolutions like to Morlul and Execute in the set, and presumably they won't be reprints. Like I don't know, but we might get a third Executor. We still have a regular one, an EX, and maybe another one. But regardless, yeah, and then 5 trainers, and we'll see. I expect the trainers, they might all be universal trainers that can be put into any deck, which is really meaningful. There's a blue and there is Leaf, and those are both universal supporters. And I'll talk about those real quickly, see what they do. It says during Leaf is double X speed, and it would also stack with X speed. Obviously, you couldn't play 2 Leafs. Retreat costs aren't that high though, so I don't know exactly how great Leaf is. Blue is kind of like reverse Giovanni. It says all your Pokemon take 10 less damage from attacks next turn, and so Giovanni says it's just to the active, right? I haven't really played Giovanni with spread. I haven't really played much. There's not that much spread, right? But yeah, just to your points active. So blue does counter Articuno EX, which is like kind of meaningful. There we'll talk about that. And there's Mew EX, yeah, we'll talk about that with no, I guess we'll talk about Mew EX now. And I'll say what it does with genome hacking for 3 colors. Choose one of your points active Pokemon's attacks and use it as this attack. This is very good. I mean, there's not really any other way to say it, but this does matter on a case by case basis. And so Mew EX, I think, is pretty clearly the most interesting card we've seen revealed so far. The other EX is Aerodactyl EX, and this is another really interesting card. Maybe not good interesting, but it says your opponent can't evolve their active Pokemon, and so that theoretically could hurt a lot of decks, or could hurt evolution decks, but not necessarily all of them. Something like Gardevoir, you're not really going to mind that much, and it is weak to lightning, which is kind of interesting. I mentioned that before, and it's a solid attacker too. Then Tauros and Marshadow are Pikachu EX counters, but I mean, you can see their attack costs. If you need a Pikachu EX counter in fighting, like, you're fighting already, right? So Marshadow is an okay attacker, and I do think with Marshadow and Aerodactyl EX, the fighting type is getting more rounded out. But looking at the metagame, fighting is it's not great. You got Marowak EX, it's probably top 10 when combined. Yeah, it's sixth when combined with Dex, but I mean Pikachu EX is way up there. These top five decks are, I mean, Starmie EX and Articuno EX I'd almost group together to some extent, and then you have these top four decks being the big four, and then beyond that, there's a pretty big fall off. So I think fighting will be closer to that, like the second tier of deck that there's some debate by different people in what's the top tier. I'll say right now, my thoughts on the metagame, Pikachu EX, clearly the best deck for me. Um, I I don't know. It's the top tier. And then the next deck is the water deck, is what I'll call it. There are different water decks, but like Starmie EX with Articuno EX, maybe Solo Articuno EX. You got Articuno EX with the Greninja, Starmie EX with the Greninja, these different decks. And you see that these decks are played some, and they have differences. And then also, I guess, the Golduck, Starmie deck. I haven't played this deck or really played against it that much, but I do want to try it out. And so I'll have some more info once I play that deck. But I haven't actually played the other. I've played this deck. I haven't played this one or this one. But regardless, Water is, I think, the second best type, and I think Mewtwo EX is the third best deck. And then, or yeah, the Water is like the second best deck, with Starmie EX, Articuno EX being the best build. But as I said, it doesn't matter that much. And then, as they have similar mid-range damage, mid to high. Pikachu X is also this mid to high range damage. Gardevoir EX is really like one-shotting, just big one-shots. And then Charizard EX is also big one-shots. I think I'd go Pikachu EX in the S tier, and then Water A tier deck 2, the second best deck in the game, Mewtwo the third best deck in the game, and Charizard DX the fourth best deck in the game. I've played some Mewtwo lately because I stopped playing it. I like Pikachu EX a lot more, as I said, in terms of how good it is, but I think it's more fun as well by a lot for me personally. And then, but I decided to play some more Mewtwo, and I didn't really find it super great. In terms of like it's okay, but it has similar upside to Charizard. But Charizard, if you set up, you're stronger, so you're kind of relying on Mewtwo being able to do things as a basic better than Charizard can do as a stage 2. But there are some big new additions to. Well, I mean, the Mew EX can go and be easily the most easily powered up within Mewtwo EX. That's the only form of energy acceleration you can put and add to it. So Mew EX is really good as an addition to Mewtwo EX. However, Mewtwo EX, well, let's just go through the decks. In terms of most of these cards, they don't really matter. Tauros is 120 for 3 to an EX, which is okay. I mean, it's not really one-shotting. EX is outside of Pikachu EX. It could be put into anything, but you can't really get energy on it very well. So if you have a deck where you have lots of extra energy attachments, it could be pretty solid, but that's not very common, of course. So we'll talk about Pikachu first. I'll open up Pikachu EX Zebstrika, and I think that actually no, I'll open up Pikachu EX with a Raichu. I don't really play this build. I play it with Zebstrika. However, I think there are some changes you can make to this deck. The big one is that you're gonna play it with the new Pikachu. This Pikachu says you do 10 for each of your bench lightning Pokemon, and it has the same stats, presumably, aside from that. And so that will be doing 30 if you have a full bench, and that's not that hard to do. Your deck's built to do that for Pikachu EX itself. And so then you have this 30 for one attacker. Now, Pincushion does 30 on a basic single point Pokemon. I think you replace Pincushion with the new Dedenne. Dedenne does 10 for 1, and it on a coin flip is Paralysis. The idea is you could buy time with the Paralysis for just 1 energy. I'm not actually sure if Dedenne is better than Pincushion. They are, they're a little bit different. I think that Pincushin's increased damage is pretty meaningful there, but Dedenne could be nice. Let's say you're up against Mewtwo EX and you want to go in with Raichu to take a big pseudo one-shot, right? It's not actually a one-shot because you can't play Giovanni the same turn you play Lieutenant Surge to power up Raichu, so you need to do something kind of weird there, but you could just attack with the Dedenne and then soften them up, hopefully get that paralysis on that coin flip, and then swing in with your Lieutenant Surge up Raichu, and that's really strong here. In terms of the other trainers, I honestly don't know how good blue is as a supporter. It seems solid. I feel like it's hard to gauge. It's hard to gauge Giovanni. Ultimately, Giovanni is just naturally stronger than blue due to the fact, and I talked about this when I was talking about blue the first time, but blue is a supporter card that you play on your turn, but it affects your opponent's turn. And on the other hand, Giovanni affects your own turn, so you can see its outcome very clearly. Your opponent can't like do something that catches you off guard because they can't do anything. There is no turn. There is no time that your opponent gets to make any actions in that, unless like you Pidgeot or something. But in that case, make sure you Pidgeot before you Giovanni. There's essentially never a reason where you do it the other way unless you want to do um, like I don't know, some weird mind games or something. But regardless, blue, your opponent, you play blue, and then your opponent knows that blue's happening, that they're not doing as much damage, and will adapt accordingly by maybe playing their Giovanni or not playing their Giovanni, or maybe going just attacking with something different, attaching somewhere different, and they can react to that versus they can't do that with Giovanni. So that is a reason why Giovanni could be better. Blue does counter the as I said Articuno spread, which is meaningful. I think that's something that is quite nice to have. Pikachu EX is obviously kind of weak, but it's not really getting one-shotted unless it's by like Mewtwo EX or Charizard EX, in which case it doesn't really matter, right? You're just getting blown out of the water anyways. There are some things that hit for 60 and they hit twice, and that doesn't feel great. There are definitely things that two-shot you exactly, and so then you could play blue, but then they might play Giovanni, right? So that's kind of weird. There aren't too many things that are hitting like knocking you out exactly with Giovanni. I feel like so blue probably isn't a card I'd play in the deck. You want to be fast, you don't want to be tanky. It just doesn't have natural synergy with lightning type as a whole. With the speed element, but is a card to consider. And then also with the other supporter, Leaf, I don't think you want to be putting that in because, I mean, your Pokemon all have one retreat cost, so that doesn't really make any sense to play, and you don't need extra copies of X speed, really. So yeah, that's not going in the deck. And in terms of the Aerodactyl EX, Marshadow, and Tauros, I don't think they're going to kill the deck. I think the deck will be the best deck in the game with uh, with this new expansion, with these cards we've seen so far. We'll, as I said, take a look at the cards that we haven't seen so far, but you do have some additions which are solid, and they're just okay, but they're decent additions. And then the other like fighting, fighting's not that good. You look at something like Aerodactyl EX, and that's not one-shotting you, and Marshadow is one-shotting you, but you one-shot it back, and it's taking up energy, and the type doesn't have energy acceleration, fighting or lightning, so I think Pikachu EX will be fine, but we'll see. Zapdos EX is obviously a sketchy attacker. That is good against fighting, though. And fighting coming up is a bit of a scare for this deck. I don't think there's a deck. I think if Water was getting better, and we'll see what happens with Water. There is a Vaporeon, which is a cool card, but it's a little combo-y, and ultimately, I don't think. If you're looking at playing Water, I don't think you're necessarily putting Vaporeon in your deck. And Leaf and Blue don't help out Water that much. We'll talk about that, but that's the deck that could come up. And you hit it for weakness anyway, so that's nice for Lightning, putting it in a very good position. Psychic is getting better, though, but Mew EX is the tech Pokemon, which I think a lot of different decks are going to play. I think slotting a Mew EX into random decks is completely fine, even if you can't accelerate energy to it, especially for a deck like Water or Fire, where you have Moltres CX or Misty, where you can get energy onto your other Pokemon. Well, you're not technically accelerating to Mew EX, you accelerate to your main attacker and then attach to Mew EX. And if you accelerate all the energy to Articuno EX, you can manually power up Mew EX over the course of a few turns while still swinging with like Articuno EX or Charizard EX or Moltres EX or whatever. Obviously, Moltres EX isn't your preferred attacker. I don't know why I said that, but Moltres EX obviously powering up your Charizard EX or your Arcanine EX would probably be the second fire attacker there. And so I do like Mew EX, and Mew EX is really bad against this deck. It's really bad against Pikachu EX because you don't do any damage into it. Presumably, it does damage based on your bench lightning Pokemon, and you probably don't have any of those. I would not include it in Pikachu EX as like a card in the mirror because or just for general use because it's really sketchy because obviously it's not a lightning Pokemon and you will be doing less damage most of the time. So certainly don't be putting that card in. It's not particularly great against the other attackers. It's not like terrible against Well, it's not Gradient's Raichu. I mean, it does one-shot it, but it also loses all the energy. So you need to finish the game with that, and it trades negatively. Raichu will one-shot you, and it's not particularly good into Zapdos EX or bad. I mean, it's whatever. It's okay, but certainly not good into it. So I think Pikachu EX will still be very good. Then looking at the water deck, I'll just look at Starmie EX with Articuno EX. Articuno EX is, or no, Starmie EX is the first evolution Pokemon we're taking. Well, no, Raichu's an evolution, but um, so with the Aerodactyl EX, which Aerodactyl EX is theoretically kind of scary. I don't think it's going to be played all over the place. It's not like a reason to not play your deck. But if the best deck in the game is countered by Aerodactyl EX, that's a big deal. Pikachu is going to sit on the bench for a lot of the game before going in. So that means you can evolve it on the bench and just do that. And your attackers are one retreat. I'm pretty sure they all are. So you can just evolve on your bench. And that's kind of the same thing for this deck, but there are times when you will start Staryu and want to go in with Starmie EX and and then Articuno EX has a 2 retreat cost. So there's a lot of things to talk about with this deck. Not a lot, but there's a lot of Pikachu. It was the new attackers. Here you're looking at the trainers and some of the interactions with other cards. And so Leaf could be good in the deck for giving free retreat to your Articuno EX, but also X speed, probably have energies. It's not like required. And then obviously it's completely useless on Starmie EX, which has free retreat, and it's not really useful on the other Pokemon either. So I would not play it. Ultimately, I don't think Leaf is a particularly good supporter. I don't think it's terrible, but within the state of the game, most Pokemon have 1 retreat, and so it's not super useful. And it's going to be wasting a lot of value. But also, you're not going to be playing supporters every turn. But with a deck like this, you have really important supporters. Every deck wants Professor's Research. Sabrina's good, and then Misty is really important for the deck. So then, as I said, blue does counter Articuno EX's bench damage in addition to its active damage, reducing that. And I think that's meaningful, stopping you from chasing these knockouts on the bench through the use of Blizzard and potentially Sabrina combos as well. So that's something that will be stopped by blue some. It's not going to like kill this card. But it does specifically like reduce Articuno EX's damage potentially by a lot, like in general. But again, I don't think this card's bad. Articuno EX's best attribute is the fact that you could burst turn 1 going first in attack, which is literally the only deck that can do that. I mean, you could play some other Misty deck with some other water Pokemon like Lapras GX or something, but it's the same idea. It's the turn 1 Misty with an element of luck there to be able to do substantial damage turn 1 going first and threatening a lot of damage going forward as well. So you're not like losing that with any of these cards here. Tauros or Marshadow, they're not countering you at all. There's nothing really that scary. Mew EX is like a little scary. Mew EX is solid against these attackers. It's completely fine. Blizzard is a 3 energy attack. So with Mew EX, you're looking to copy expensive attacks. We'll talk about Charizard EX, but and Mewtwo EX. However, Mew EX is 3 energy. And these are cheaper than that or the same cost, but with energy acceleration. So ultimately, you're not necessarily like Mew EX isn't a great counter to these, but it's okay. Certainly an okay attacker into them if you have something else to back it up. So this is a deck that isn't going to necessarily want to see Mew EX, unlike Pikachu EX, where you do want to see Mew EX because they're not really going to be able to hit back. So keep that in mind. You're not a bad deck. Nothing too much to say about water. I think it's one of the less affected decks, but there are some interesting interactions to talk about there. Then with a Mewtwo EX with a Gardevoir, and this is the big deck with Mew EX, because you can accelerate to Mew EX with your Gardevoir, so you can get that up turn 3 going first, which you... Oh, can you get a Mewtwo EX turn 3 going first? Yeah, you have to. No, you cannot. So you cannot do Side Drive turn 3 going first, but you could use Genome Hacking turn 3 going first. Genome Hacking isn't like a super consistent attack, but it's good against certain decks. It's good against Charizard. It's bad against Pikachu, but it's good against most other decks, or at least okay. It also does one-shot Mewtwo EX. Mewtwo EX is a card that can one-shot itself, and so Mew EX will one-shot Mewtwo EX, and it's less energy. That's a really big deal, meaning Mew EX is 100% included in this deck, and also something that scares Mewtwo EX, because generally it lives a hit. And essentially, if you set up your Mewtwo EX with your Gardevoir, you just attack twice the side drive and win, and your opponent can't really do much to stop that from happening. But UEX can go in there, and your opponent can maybe set it up if they just get two attachments, or like just one attachment early on, and then you sacrifice the Pokemon attached to it again, and then send it up and attack for the third attachment. Just you need to maybe sacrifice some Pokemon, but then buy some time and swing into Mewtwo EX and one-shot it. That's really strong. There was something I talked about this before. I don't know its interactions with Mew EX, copying Side Drive if you don't have Psychic Energies attached, but I'd assume you don't discard anything. So it's absolutely insane. You don't lose the two energies. If you do lose the two psychic energies or two of some other energies, um, then it's not it's not great, but it's still okay, right? It's just acting as intended. But essentially, what I'm assuming is that you get this insane upside of a really strong attack, and you're a three colorless energy, a basic Pokemon, and you're hitting 150, and that's it. That's just it, and you're just one-shotting stuff. If you're playing Mew EX in a deck that's not Mewtwo EX, if it is. And you're in the mirror matchup, you're playing Mewtwo EX, or you're playing Gardevoir Mew EX, and your opponent's playing Mewtwo EX, you're just attacking with for one less energy, which is again really good. So UEX is insane with this deck and insane against this deck, and it's going to make this deck probably even more volatile than it is right now, though it is another solid attacker in a good few matchups, though not against Pikachu EX. So Pikachu EX will outspeed you, apply pressure, damage your Mew EX, and this is something interesting with the math, specifically with Zebstrika, and I guess with Raichu too. Raichu could one-shot Mew EX, which is worse than it's not one-shotting Mewtwo EX really, and then it can also they hit you for 90, but they can hit you for 100 with a Giovanni, and then snipe you with a Zebstrika, and that'll two-shot your UEX. That doesn't happen to Mewtwo EX, so that's something to consider. UX's lower HP is a downside to it. It's not a card that it's a solid attacker. I'd highly recommend putting at least one copy within Gardevoir, probably replacing the Mewtwo. I haven't really seen people use Mewtwo and Mewtwo EX, like the baby Mewtwo, the 1 point Mewtwo, because I don't know, it seems just not super spectacular. I've seen Jinx, I've seen various things, and I have seen people play Mewtwo, but it's not a bad card. I'm not saying it's bad, but I would 100% play UEX over this Mewtwo. And it's an attacker that you can power up manually 3 times. You can attach to Mewtwo EX twice and start Psychic Sphering, and that is solid. That's definitely applying decent damage onto the board, but you might get higher value out of Mew EX, or you might not. But regardless, Mew EX is really interesting for this deck. I don't know exactly the ramifications of how it's going to be better and how it's going to be worse, but I'm excited to see. Then Charizard EX, Moltres EX. This is a deck that I haven't played with. I unfortunately don't have the Moltres EX. I need another one of those. But I've played against it a decent amount. I think I play against it now more than I don't know. The top 4 decks I see decently evenly in terms of the plays. I've seen a lot less Mewtwo than I was earlier, but Charizard EX. With Mew EX is just going to one-shot Charizard EX, and there's nothing you can do about it, and it's insane. Like, it's a basic Pokemon hitting 200 for 3. Like, that's insane. So BBX is very bad for this card. I mean, Charizard EX, it's not like you auto lose if your opponent plays Mew EX, I don't think, but it can't be good, right? Like, you might actually auto lose. It's pretty bad because you're not gonna counter them with Moltres EX. I mean, Moltres EX is okay against Mew EX, I guess. You're just going to be heat blasting each other back and forth, and you're exactly two-shotting them, so then if they play their blue, they will be able to survive a hit, but you're not necessarily playing with a ton of deck space in this deck. You might want to put in like an Arcanine line. There are different things you could do with this deck, but you could slot in a blue, and that could help against with a Moltres EX, but that's not really an attacker, and it's kind of hard to get powered up unless you're using multiple Moltres EXs. And so Mew EX is just going to one-shot Charizard EX. As I said, I believe you keep the energies on, so unless it's a Charizard EX mirror and they're playing Mew EX, but assuming that's not happening, then they manually attach. Charizard EX isn't swinging turn 2, right? That's definitely objectively not happening. So if they swing turn 3, you can just get the 3 energies on, essentially, not like guaranteed. You do need the Mew EX, but it's pretty easy to get, and they're not applying direct pressure until they attack with Charizard EX for the first time, and they're not setting up 2 Charizard EXs. If they are, then that's really bad for you, right? I mean, if Charizard EX has 2 Charizard EXs and you haven't damaged their Moltres EX, then I don't really know what to say about that. But assuming that's not happening, which I've never seen that happen in a game, then your opponent is going to have their Charizard EX and knock you out. Let's say they even take 2 points, one shot like a Mewtwo EX or not Pikachu EX because you're not playing Mew EX, but whatever, they one shot something. Now you just instantly respond, take a knockout with Mew EX, and now they need to be super careful with whatever they send up because you still have this UEX threatening stuff, and they don't have anything behind it. The UEX is really bad for this deck. Like I cannot overstate how it's not going to kill the deck, I don't think, but it can't be good, right? Then you look at something else like Arcanine EX, right, which can be played with it, and that's a wait, how much? What's it do? Um, okay, yeah, it does 20 to itself. So this gets a little more complicated. You don't one-shot Mew EX with your Arcanine EX. And generally, when I talk about Charizard EX, and I'm talking about this deck as well, I kind of group these together. I think most people do. They're not exactly the same, but they're pretty similar. And Arcanine EX here, it has 150 HP and it does 120 and 20 to itself. And so MUEX will do self damage if it copies it. And so if MUEX hits into you and then you hit into it back, then you'll have 10 HP remaining and MUEX will be knocked out. However, 10 HP is within Giovanni range, so you might want to play blue to counter that. You also might want to play your own Giovanni to one shot the MUEX, but one-shotting it versus having them one-shot you when they attack, how much does it matter? It might matter. It might. I actually don't know what happens if you knock yourself out and take game at the same time. I haven't seen that happen, but that'd definitely be a thing that could happen. Um, and so it just gets really weird. But this is definitely better than the Charizard DX situation where they're just gonna one shot you, and after you've got 4 energy on a stage 2, and you still can't do anything, right? So this is definitely better against BUEX. It's kind of a toss up that's favored towards you because if they play their Giovanni, they're only attacking once, that you're taking damage twice, but the one's from yourself. So there's only one turn to Giovanni. You only need to play blue that one turn. And they're probably not playing like some spread or snipe deck. They could, maybe they're playing Greninja MUEX or something like that. But blue will be potentially pretty good there, but that's a lot of stuff you're using here in terms of decks, basically a stage 2 line, a stage 1 line, a basic line, and also some like tech supporters. That's kind of hard, but this is definitely something that's better against MUEX. Also, you could put MUEX in Charizard EX. MUEX against itself is not doing much of anything, right? But you could put that in as an option for other matchups, for the mirror matchup, things like that. But again, you can't accelerate to it, but you accelerate to your Charizard EX, and you have a lot of energy acceleration in this deck. It's probably the deck with the most consistent high energy acceleration. You're not necessarily getting your Charizard EX every single game, but you're probably getting your Moltres EX every single game and attacking twice with it. It might get knocked out, but you'll probably attack twice with it, and you're probably going to get 3 energies. That's pretty common, and that's enough to attack with your Arcanine EX, and then you attach to the Moltres EX that one turn to power it up, but then the other turns you're going to be you can attach to your MUEX and get something going there. Will that be good? I don't know. There's a lot of turns of attacking, not necessarily doing too much with Moltres EX. That's how the deck goes because it really relies on the big evolution attacker to kind of sweep, and Arcanine EX isn't necessarily a sweeper. Charizard EX is completely a sweeper, but yeah, there's some stuff to consider here. And then you have Leaf, I guess we'll talk about. Leaf could be okay in the deck. I mean, you 100% want to retreat your Moltres EX. That's not every game, but a lot of the times it's good to do that. So if your Charizard EX goes down, you don't instantly lose. But XP does that. You do lose the fire on Moltres EX, though, which isn't ideal. And you're not playing a ton of supporters either, so I wouldn't hate playing Leaf in this deck, but it's not super great. I mean, a lot of your Pokemon do have 2 retreat, but X-Speed might just be fine. It's probably fine, to be honest, which is kind of a bummer, right? Because I feel like this is a deck that is the closest we've seen to potentially playing Leaf. I feel like Leaf just isn't great, but, we'll see about the other supporters. Then we have Arbok Weezing as another deck here, and Ninetales Rapidash, and yeah, those are the 2 single prize decks. And then you have stuff with like different Weezing decks, maybe Greninja. I think Greninja within single prize decks is a legit thing. Like Greninja Weezing, that's a deck that I played. It's not great, but it's fun. And then like Muck Weezing, yeah, things like that. So within Arbok Weezing, Muck has a really high retreat cost. I believe Grimer's retreat cost is high as well. Yeah, it's 3, so Leaf would be good there, I guess. But people are like Grimer's just not great. Its high retreat does make it worse, but the Muck isn't a great attacker. It's okay, and in long drawn out games, it can be kind of insane. But um, I don't think it's a card where like I probably wouldn't include Leaf in this deck, though you do have these high retreat cost. And then you also have, and like, it only plays 1x speed normally, or at least in this list. So you're not necessarily looking. I mean, you have switches in Koga for your Wheezing, and Arbok, you're not really looking to retreat out very often either. So ultimately, that's probably not the card you want to be playing. Something like Blue. Blue could be pretty good, though, because Arbok can get one-shotted by Pikachu EX. That's something I see come up. I played a bunch of this deck. I played a bunch of Pikachu EX, and that's 100% a thing where you play Giovanni, try to one-shot the Arbok, and that's something you got to kind of watch out for. Or maybe they're attacking like Zapdos EX, and two heads is certainly pretty common, and the idea there would be that you can reduce that from like stop that from happening. And so I think you would get value out of Blue within this deck. You're trying to kind of slow the game down, get poison ticks, and just win that way, win through a little bit of extra damage, and that Blue could equate to 20 extra damage in the game, which is really nice, or 20 extra free damage plus the attack. So it is something pretty meaningful potentially, and I do like that here. Occasionally you'll see your opponent like Articuno EXing, sniping, Starmie EX plus Giovanni, same thing as Pikachu because you're hitting 90 in both cases. So definitely a solid include. I do like Blue within this deck. And same thing here, where you have the Ninetales, right? Ninetales can get one-shot by Pikachu EX. And so Starmie EX is one-shotting you, but they're hitting you for weakness, so nothing you can do about that. But all the stuff I said for the Arbok applies to Rapidash, and some of it applies to Ninetales as well, where you can say, I'm going to play Blue. Do you have the Giovanni to one-shot my Ninetales? If you don't, then it's living. So I think it's pretty nice here. Obviously, it's a pretty supporter-heavy deck. You got Blaine, in addition to other normal supporters. So how easily does it slide into the deck? It's not super easy, but it is what it is. I think those are solid includes. And then UEX isn't really something you want to be playing. Certainly not in this deck. The deck isn't like really struggling for energy, I wouldn't say, but it's a deck where you don't have tons of excess energy either, so UEX probably doesn't fit into this deck very well. Theoretically, you could set up a UEX behind a Weezing, and I don't completely despise that as a one-of attacker. I feel like different attackers within a Weezing box style decks is fair. Like Kangaskhan, Meowth. I play Meowth. I play a Weezing Greninja deck sometimes, and I play Meowth in that, and that's good. And you just see these different basic tech attackers. UEX is pretty different. It's expensive and something you're kind of building up to, but it is a good card, and it might ultimately end up being good. I'm not really entirely sure, to be honest, but it's not like an obvious include or anything like that, but it could have value there. And Aerodactyl EX can't be great for these decks either, right? You do have some mobility within this deck. I said you didn't have a ton of mobility within this. I mean, you have the Kogas, but you might struggle to evolve against Aerodactyl EX. I mean, Aerodactyl EX can't be good for this deck, right? Like, it hits you for weakness. It's just going to be one-shotting all your Pokemon. They're such bad. And also, you're poison. They have, like, the fossils. They can do fossil shenanigans, and it just probably can't end very well. Fighting is not good for you. And fighting increasing, it can't be good for this deck, and fighting type or in darkness type as a whole. I don't know if all the darkness Pokemon are weak to fighting, but the best ones certainly are. Um, and yeah, not too much to say. I said stuff about. Oh wait, no, there's something else to say. Yeah, that's Magmar. I forgot about this card. Also, Tauros. Tauros is kind of a consideration within these decks. It's kind of like the same role as Mach. It's essentially the exact same role as Mach, except it's a basic, which could be what you're looking for. But Mach does offer some interesting options as well. But within this deck, Blaine, if you don't know it, boosts Ninetales, Rapidash, and Magmar. And there's a new Magmar, which is really interesting for 2 fire. It does 80. It has 80. It has 2 retreat, and you just go 2 fires from it. I don't love the card. Its 2 retreat is kind of awkward. Again, then you're looking into like Leaf territory, which isn't necessarily where you want to be looking because your retreat cost is 1 on literally everything else. The current Magmar is mediocre. It's like 50 for 2. You have way lower upside, way lower downside. Just creating 2 fires. As I said, there is some energy issues with the deck. It's not like serious, but it's it's doing what it needs to. It's probably meeting the energy attachments pretty much exactly. And yeah, the Magmar doesn't slot very well into that. However, it is a strong attacker on a basic, but it's probably not very good, right? Like Ninetales, its stats are objectively better. It is an evolution, but aside from that, its stats are objectively better, and I think you'll just kind of rely on that. And yeah, that's what I do. It's not a super free setup. You might need to research into the Ninetales or whatever, but um, it's still probably better to do it this way without the Magmar, unfortunately. Um, a few other decks to talk about here to wrap things up. Marowaki X, right? We got to talk about this, I guess. Marowaki X with Sandslash. I think Aerodactyl EX is a great secondary attacker. It can't exactly be your main attacker because it is a fossil basic. I mean, you can't ever start it, which isn't great, but I do like that. The retreat costs aren't that high, so you could just X speed and then go into the Aerodactyl EX, so that's fine. And it could be a deck that wants to go first to stop your opponent from evolving. Aerodactyl EX is scary, certainly for these stage 1 base decks. It can be good for them. Well, it might be good for this deck because you'd play the Aerodactyl EX. It also gives you this like pivot type card. You could, let's say you start a Marowak or a Cubone, your opponent plays in the Aerodactyl EX. Then on your turn, you go ahead, you play X speed retreat to the Fossil or the Amber. I think it's Amber. And then you evolve, then pop the Fossil, discard it, and send back up your Cubone or your Marowak EX at that point, or whatever. Sandslash could be fine as well. And yeah, you just go ahead and do that. And I think that's pretty solid. I mean, it's obviously kind of weird, kind of complicated, and I do think Primeape is also okay. I do believe that Primeape is a pretty solid attacker. Not great. It's kind of sketchy, has some pretty serious downsides, but it's kind of interesting. And trading into MUEX is certainly fine. Sandslash trades positively with it. Marowak EX trades evenly into MUEX. That's fine. Nothing too bad that you're looking at there. With these other attackers with the MUEX, this is probably good against it. I mean, this deck, its best matchup by far is well, okay. It's played against a bunch of decks one time, but ignoring those decks, its best matchup is obviously it's Mewtwo, right? Mewtwo's a great matchup. It's what this deck's made to beat, and MUEX is the same type, same weakness, and so it's got to be pretty solid. And your single price, it's going to be good there. Mewtwo does have a lower retreat, so you can see it retreating. Mewtwo X is almost never retreating, and that's almost never something you want to do because you need another Mewtwo X with a bunch of energies, and you're losing the energies and stuff. If you played against it, I'm sure you probably have not seen him retreat very many times with the Mewtwo. You've seen him retreat their alts. And then yeah, the Blaine deck, I mean that's probably fine with against UEX. I think it's whatever. I mean Ninetales will be one-shotting you, or no, UBX will be one-shotting Ninetales, but you're trading evenly, and like it's all right. Flamethrower plus Fire Rain without Blaine is one-shotting. They're never one-shotting, or is two-shotting, but you're never one-shotting. But it's fine, I don't think it's anything to worry about there, or to get really excited about. And Alakazam's probably like, wait, how much does it do? It does, Alakazam will actually one-shot it. It'll be doing 150, which is like good, I guess, against MUEX, but Alakazam, obviously, it's not a great deck. I don't think anyone really is thinking that it's that good. Things like Dragonite, I mean, Dragonite versus MUEX, I just don't really, actually, that's probably bad, because MUEX is probably going to be going, like, get set up before Dragonite, and they're going to, like, Sabrina your Dragonite into the active and just, like, obliterate you, but regardless, whatever, that doesn't really matter. Overall, MUEX, though, I think is a game changer. I think it's a great attacker. And some other top decks are getting some new cards to play with and to play against. But I'm really excited for this new set. But tell me down below what you think, how this is going to change the game. And obviously, once the new set drops and the full set drops, we'll take a look at all those. But I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.